While 2014 did bring a slew of new and great games to the PlayStation 4, a lot of those games went underappreciated and underlooked due to the sheer amount of games that were available on the console this year. In this video, we take a look at 10 underappreciated and underrated PS4 games that you should think about trying out. Number 10, Toukiden Kiwami. Toukiden is a series that gained fame on the PlayStation Vita, and earlier this year, the new Toukiden game, Toukiden Kiwami, actually released on the PlayStation 4. The game was developed by Omega Force and published by Tecmo Koei, who are famous for the Dynasty Warrior type games. Toukiden is a game that's very similar to games like Monster Hunter, and considering there isn't a Monster Hunter game available on current PlayStation platforms, Toukiden is really the best replacement you can find right now. And it's not a bad game at all. The only problem with Toukiden Kiwami on PlayStation 4 is that you can obviously tell that it is a PlayStation Vita title. Yes, the graphics have been souped up a little bit for the PS4 and the PS4 hardware, but you can tell that the essence of the game was made for the PlayStation Vita hardware. So really, the game looks like a mid-tier PS3 game at best. Still, if you can get past the graphics, there's a lot to like in Toukiden Kiwami. And if you're a fan of Monster Hunter type games, where you have to slay giant monsters and giant beasts, definitely check out Toukiden Kiwami. It's a game that definitely deserves some more love on the PlayStation 4. Number 9 is Dying Light by Techland. Now, Dying Light did actually sell pretty well and went on to sell over 1 million copies on all platforms, but it was a game that really became one of the sleeper hits of 2015. And it was a game that I expected to be much bigger than it actually was. It was an open world zombie type game, the type of game that you think Western audiences would absolutely adore. And while there were a lot of people that did enjoy Dying Light, you would expect it to be a game that would sell over 2 or 3 million copies on all platforms. It's got very good parkour gameplay mechanics where you have to run away from the zombies, decent gunplay, and obviously has gorgeous visuals. And since it is an open world title, there's a lot of content in the game as well. Dying Light is just one of those games you don't know why it didn't do as well as it should have. Dying Light is just one of those games that you would think a lot more people would know about. But it's a game that released very early on in the year, and at this point in October, a lot of people have forgotten about it. But if you were one of the people that didn't give Dying Light a chance, at this point you can probably find it for a decent price. It's definitely a game from earlier this year you should check out. Number 8, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture by the Chinese Room. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is one of those games that's a walking simulator, and it tries to tell a story in a very artsy way. There was a game that released on the PC a few years back called Dear Esther. That game was also made by the Chinese Room, and it has a lot of similarities to Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. Console gamers have not experienced a lot of games like it. It's not really a game. Rather, like I said, it's more of a walking simulator where it tries to tell you a story in a non-linear way, and it's a very artsy game. It's kind of hard to understand. It's a game that definitely isn't for everybody, but if you're looking for a title that actually makes games seem like an art form, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is probably as good of a game as any to do that. Like I said, console gamers are not really accustomed to these kinds of games. Yes, we had titles like Journey, Flower, but Everybody's Gone to the Rapture probably has less gameplay than even those titles. If you go into the game with an open mind, you might be very surprised. A lot of gamers were really off-put by it. But it does tell a very good story in a very unique way. If you're looking for a game that's very different, give Everybody's Gone to the Rapture a look. It's one of the more interesting PS4 exclusives of the year. Number 7, Wolfenstein: The Old Blood. Remember Wolfenstein: The New Order from 2014? That was one of the most critically acclaimed first-person shooters of 2014. Well, Wolfenstein: The Old Blood is actually a downloadable title that's a prequel to The New Order. It's a standalone title for $20. While it's not as lengthy of a game as The New Order, obviously, it's a fraction of the price, it still gives you a very entertaining self-contained story, with the game having some intense firefights, really cool locations, and a balance between stealth gameplay and action gameplay. The quality of the story definitely doesn't compare to The New Order, and for $20, The Old Blood is a great first-person shooter that you can play for about 3-4 hours and then you could be done with. But if you were a fan of The New Order, and a lot of people were, there's no reason really not to check out The Old Blood. Number 6, Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Whoa there, I know, it's an Assassin's Creed title on an underrated games list. What is this sorcery? Let me explain. With the release of Assassin's Creed Unity in 2014 easily being the worst Assassin's Creed game of all time and just being a horrible game altogether, many people became burnt out with the Assassin's Creed franchise, thought that it had nothing left to give, thought that Assassin's Creed Syndicate was gonna end up the same way as Assassin's Creed Unity, a broken pile of garbage, and therefore Assassin's Creed Syndicate just isn't getting the love that it deserves. I was one of those people that I was like, man, Assassin's Creed Syndicate is gonna be a terrible game just like Unity. But Syndicate actually innovated the Assassin's Creed formula a lot. The game added a grappling hook, which makes it a lot easier to traverse through sections of the game. The side content is actually very entertaining entertaining. The two main characters, Jacob and Evie Fry, are also very well developed characters, unlike the character you saw in Assassin's Creed Unity, Arno. There's just a lot of great things about Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and it improves upon Assassin's Creed Unity in every single way. And while that's not a hard thing for Assassin's Creed Syndicate to actually do, since AC Unity was terrible in so many ways, Syndicate really is a great game. If you're a fan of some of the other Assassin's Creed games like Assassin's Creed 2 or Assassin's Creed 4, definitely give Assassin's Creed Syndicate a look. It really brings Assassin's Creed back to where gamers really enjoyed the series. And right now, Assassin's Creed Syndicate just released and hardly anybody's talking about it. Everybody's still got a sour taste in their mouth from Assassin's Creed Unity, but take Syndicate as its own game, it is very, very good. Number 5 is the formerly PC exclusive RPG Divinity Original Sin. Divinity Original Sin was developed by Larian Studios, and it was released on PC back in June of 2014. The goal of Divinity Original Sin was to modernize the classical RPG formula, and it really succeeded in doing that. On PC, this game gained a lot of notoriety. It sold very, very well on Steam. On PS4, gamers aren't really accustomed to these kinds of games anymore though. A game similar to Divinity Original Sin would be a game like Baldur's Gate, and Baldur's Gate released on the PS2 a long time ago, so we really haven't seen a game like this in a long time on the consoles. But Divinity Original Sin did a great job of transitioning its PC controls onto a controller. The game plays great on the PlayStation 4, it's great to play the game on a TV, and it's a very good RPG with turn-based combat, cooperative multiplayer, and a highly interactive world. The game also has a very good story. The one thing that may detract console players is that the game doesn't really hold your hand. It doesn't really tell you where to go to advance the main plotline further, and it drops you into a world and you kind of have to find yourself. Console games used to do that a long time ago, back in the NES, SNES era, but nowadays games really hold your hand and tell you where to go. You have custom waypoints and all that kind of stuff, but Divinity Original Sin is really like a classical RPG. They tried to modernize the formula of it, of course, but it still has a lot of the elements of the RPGs back in the day. It's a very good game, and if you want to play more of a hardcore RPG, give Divinity Original Sin a try. Larian Studios did a great job with it. Number 4 is Axiom Verge, developed by Tom Happ. Yes, Axiom Verge was developed by one person over the course of 4 years, and we have to give it up to Tom Happ because he created one of the best games of the year. Axiom Verge is a side-scroller similar to old-school Metroid games. Many people consider it one of those Metroidvania type games where it's a side-scroller, but there's really no linearity to the game. The art style is really crisp and very vibrant with a lot of different colors. The soundtrack in Axiom Verge is top-notch, and the game is just phenomenal. Obviously, the game doesn't stand out in the graphical department like a lot of other PlayStation 4 titles, but that's not what Axiom Verge is striving for. Tom Happ created a great game that harkens back to old 8 and 16-bit games, and if you were a gamer during the late 80s and the early 90s, Axiom Verge is an absolute love letter to people like you. Give Axiom Verge a look. You gotta support games like this, indie games like this that obviously have a lot of work put into them. It isn't easy to put out a game like Axiom Verge, but he did it anyway, and hats off to Tom Happ. It was a fantastic game. Number 3 is Tearaway Unfolded, developed by Media Molecule. Media Molecule gained immense fame on the PlayStation 3 for their Little Big Planet series. They developed Tearaway on the PlayStation Vita a few years back, and Tearaway Unfolded is a remake of the PlayStation Vita game, and it was released on the PlayStation 4 back in September. In addition to the original PlayStation Vita title, the PS4 version added updated graphics, new areas, and had new features utilizing the DualShock 4. It's largely the same experience as the PlayStation Vita title, but the PS4 version is the definitive version of the game. Tearaway Unfolded showcases what Media Molecule does best, and that's creativity. The game revolves around environmental platform interaction, customizability, and puzzles. It's a very interesting game with a very unique art style and a very unique look as well. Now obviously Tearaway doesn't blow anyone away with things like its narrative. The pacing isn't the best, but in Tearaway, Media Molecule showcases what it does best: great platforming gameplay and great creativity as well. And it's a budget title, so it's cheaper than every other retail release out there, so give Tearaway Unfolded a look. It's a great game by Media Molecule. Number 2 is the science fiction survival horror game Soma by Frictional Games. Now Soma was released on the PlayStation 4 and PC, and it had a lot of fame on PC. That is because Frictional Games are famous for Amnesia: The Dark Descent, which was a PC exclusive. Soma was released on the PlayStation 4 as well, and a lot of gamers on PS4 never have played Amnesia, so they didn't really get what the craze was about Soma and why it had a lot of potential. Soma takes place on Pathos 2, an underwater remote research facility where machinery begins to take human characteristics. It doesn't have the conventional horror where a giant monster pops out of nowhere and you don't see it coming. Rather, it's a psychological horror game that really messes up your mind. Soma is a game with very little combat. Rather, it's a game where the player progresses through puzzle solving, exploration, and the use of stealth. These days, many gamers have seen a lot with horror games. It's very hard for the typical horror game to scare us these days, and in my opinion, Soma is the evolution of what horror games should become. It's not perfect by any means, but Frictional Games have created a dark and grim atmosphere in the world of Soma. If you were a fan of horror games in the past, but you just got burnt out of the series, it can bring you back into the genre. And finally, number 1 is the first-person puzzle game, The Talos Principle. The Talos Principle was developed by Crow Team and was published by Devolver Digital. It was originally released on the PC back in December of 2014, and it just released on the PS4 back in October of this year. And Talos Principle takes number 1, especially on PS4 because it is so underrated. The game has good reviews, don't get me wrong about that, but barely anyone has played the Talos Principle. A lot of people might not be willing to drop $50 on a puzzle game like the Talos Principle, especially during the time of year it released in. With games like Fallout 4 releasing, a lot of people aren't gonna drop $50 on Talos Principle. The game has a very interesting philosophical storyline, and the name The Talos Principle comes from Talos of the Greek mythology. You don't see a lot of puzzle games these days with a heavy emphasis on its narrative as well, but that's what you're getting out of The Talos Principle. The Talos Principle had tremendous critical reception with an 89 on Metacritic. Commercially, it's a different story, but if you're a fan of puzzle games, The Talos Principle is giving you a lot to like, and it's very different from the typical puzzle games you see. It has a heavy emphasis on its narrative, and it expresses it in a very unique way where you play as an android and you solve these puzzles, and it's just a very unique game, and I think that's what 2015 was really defined by. There were a lot of indie games that, yes, they were very underrated, but that might be because they were very different than what you see typically, and I think the Talos Principle really embodies that to a T. So that is going to end our list of the top 10 underrated PS4 games of 2015. Let us know what you guys thought in the comment section down below. Is there an underrated game we missed? Do you think there's a game that shouldn't even be on this list, like Assassin's Creed Syndicate? Or do you think there was a game ranked too low, too high? Let us know everything like that in the comment section down below. If you guys have a request for a future video, also leave it in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.